Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Nerd Caliber. This is Emmanuel, and today I want to talk to Bandai about more about their amazing figures, particularly about Dragon Ball. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Cisco Maldonado, and I am the Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Bandai America.
Excellent. I'm dying to see what you have for us today.
Well, we have a whole bunch of stuff, right? And if you and your fans are out there, I'll give you a little test right now. So, what do all these things have in common besides just being Dragon Ball? So, all of these are different versions of Goku, right?
Okay.
And sort of what's interesting, right? Besides the fact that like Bandai has just tons of Dragon Ball stuff, and basically all of our lines are represented here that are anchored by Goku, which arguably is the most iconic and well-known of all the Dragon Ball characters out there, right?
Yes.
And just recently, we gave a poll to fans across the country, right? Like, hey, of Dragon Ball fans out there, like, who's your favorite character? Like, which character would you want to have at dinner, right? And what's your favorite moment? And all these things like that, right? And there's really some fascinating information. Like, one of them is like 65% of the US population, right? Just like 6 or 7 out of 10 people know that Dragon Ball exists,
Yes.
right? Even at all, whether they've seen an episode or not, they'll look at Goku and be like, oh yeah, that's the Dragon Ball, right? As opposed to like, that is Super Saiyan 4 Goku from this episode and this arc in the manga, but not the show, right? So there's varying levels. And I think what's really important and kind of fun when we talk about it is when we explore just why is it that people like Goku the most, right? Like what makes him stand out, right? And obviously, so he's the main character and he ties all the narratives together for Dragon Ball, right? But you first have to think about what makes Dragon Ball so popular in the first place, right? So we have to kind of go back in time, right? And then about like 20, 23 years ago, right? The first Dragon Ball animation started on like Toonami, right? And that was sort of that block that for the first time, kids, older kids, you're from your 9 to like 13 years old, they were exposed to Dragon Ball for the first time. And in order to understand the impact of that, you have to remember what other cartoons were out around the same time, right? You had like Rugrats and you had like Doug and like Super Friends was a little bit like a few years beforehand. So that's what people were used to, right? And like Thundercats was right around that same time. Well, for the first time, people saw Dragon Ball and it was like the equivalent of eating toast your entire life and then someone giving you pizza, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
It's sort of like toast, but what is this, right?
Yes.
It's something that no one had ever seen before, right? Like Goku would yell so loud it would crack a planet. Like you don't see that on Super Friends, right? And so for the first time, it was something in an epic scale and like razor sharp animation style and like speed lines and all these things that was so over the top. Just visually, that was enough. But it went further than that, right? It was engaging storylines that continued, right?
Yeah.
Prior to that, the cartoons and the animated content that kids would be seeing, maybe once in a while you had a very exciting two-parter, right? And then like, oh, there's a part 2 next week. Well, return like Dragon Ball, like you have sagas that go on for multiple episodes and they continue, right? Which means you have very deep, engaging storylines with some themes that can only be done with extended content. Themes of not just good versus evil, but redemption and self-doubt. And am I going to be good enough? Should I help this person even though I know what's going to happen? Or like all these things and pretty mature themes for kids who have never been used to it before, right? And I think that had such a cultural impact on the people watching it because they'd never seen anything like it before with deep, engaging storylines, right? It really cemented itself in like the consciousness of like, oh my goodness, there's a new way of storytelling that I'm involved in, right?
Yes.
And because there's so many different characters, you can see Goku and his evolution, and it all rotates around Goku, right?
Yeah.
And so he has, and I guess like writers would call it a flat story arc, right? Like he is the optimist. He believes in the good in others. He doesn't go bad and then turn good again, and he's not good and turn all these things. He is constant, which means that all the villains that come up against him are a perfect foil to test his moral compass,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to Vegeta, who was bad and then realized that he was living the lie of power is the ultimate, goal towards everything, and then he realizes and then he helps out, versus someone who's just evil all the time but then not really sure, right? It's Goku who's that even keeled, right?
Hmm.
And then he also has that duality of he can be very endearing, right? And kind of cute, and when he's eating like ramen, and he's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
And then he has other moments when he is in his ultimate form and he punches someone so hard, like time stops and it goes black and white. Like, who sees something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so that huge range of emotion on top of an engaging storyline that goes on for weeks, like the cultural impact, like there are sports stars, right? There's NFL players who look at Dragon Ball before they play. Like that's their training montage, right?
Yeah.
Think of
Yeah.
like Eye of the Tiger in Survivor, right? You hear that at the gym and you want to get going more. Well, it's the same thing, right?
Hmm.
It's these themes of, can I be better than I was yesterday? How hard can I push myself to reach that next level, right? Kids had never
Yeah.
been exposed to that before, right? And I think all of these things culminate in stuff like this, right?
Yes.
The mere fact that there are all these different versions of Goku that represent every single line of stuff that Bandai makes is a testament, one, to the character, right? That is so versatile, even though it's the same character all the way through, right? But it also speaks to the overall story of why Dragon Ball as a property exists in the first place, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking very esoteric and very meta, but that's what it really is, right? Like, you don't see a whole lot of people wearing T-shirts and doing signs in the end zone of like manga of other stuff, right? But they do for
Yeah.
Dragon Ball, which means it really has an emotional connection. And when you have an emotional connection to something, you want to have a piece of it, a physical, tangible piece of a show that has had an impact on you. Well,
Yes.
what is a physical, tangible piece of a show that has an impact of you, other than like wearing a shirt, right? Like, because you can only wear this so many times a week before it starts getting ratty, right? But like, this is something you can have on your desk, right? And you display it and you share it. And action figures specifically, I think, tell you more about the person who owns them than about the property itself, right?
Yep.
You ask somebody, are you a Vegeta guy or are you a Goku guy? It can't be both. They'll be one or
Yeah.
the other, right? And that'll tell you something about themselves, right?
Yeah, it's
And
true.
so
True.
it's
It's
these
like
neat little,
it's like the Superman Batman thing.
or Elvis and the Beatles. You
Yes.
can't be
Yes.
both. You
Yeah.
have to be one camp. You can like them both, but you identify as one versus the other. Superman,
Yep.
Batman, exactly the same thing, right? So I think that Dragon Ball creates that dynamic that enables us to make like all sorts of stuff, right? For every entry point, right? So if you look at like right here, this is like our limit breaker line, and these guys are like $12, right? $12.99, and they're mostly for kids, right? And they have like the arms, legs move, and they're kind of rough and tumble, right? Like this is for kids for the most
Yeah.
part, right? And so you're not going to break them, but if I do a close up on them, what's really cool for collectors, it also satisfies them. Because if you look at the tooling in the face, it looks just like the anime. Like
Yeah.
it's really, really good. So you can be a collector and like this version of Goku, and you're not going to think twice like, oh, it's for kids. Like, no. Like this is another form of Goku that you can have on your shelf, right? Because you're a fan about that, right? And then if you look at this little guy right here, right? So this is part of our Adverge line. He comes in a 4-pack, right?
Okay.
For like $25, right? And then you have these guys, right? These are the Evolve collection, right? So these guys are like, they've been around for about a year now, right? But specifically, right, like you have like great points of articulation, right?
Yeah, look at that. Nice, great pose.
Yeah. And if even like the hands, right? So from this to that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And from here to that makes a difference, right? Little tiny things for $10. Yeah.
And look
right?
how the pants look. I mean, it looks like you could actually like like it's like they're actually fabric, but it's not.
Exactly. Right. And then here, right, this is sort of like our mainstay line. These are the these are like the 1999 figures, right? So these are the Dragon Stars, right? And these are sort of like your favorite character, right?
Mm.
And there's lots of different versions. So there's this version, and then we have like a power-up version, which basically is the same character, but it tells a story in a box. And basically that story is, remember that time when Goku went Super Saiyan for the first time?
Yes.
And so you have the little energy blasts, right? And in the back of the package, you know, here's all the stuff that you get, right?
Mm.
So you can create that moment again, right?
Oh,
And it's
that's
just
amazing.
$5 more, right? So for the core or casual collector who wants to actually pose and not just have the character by themselves, this is that moment in time that they can recreate, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And then we have, you know, and everything in between, you know, we have like a puzzle here. This is Correction Cube. So this is from the makers of Rubik's, like a Rubik's Cube plus Goku. So this is a puzzle.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can kind of see it. So it's like kind of twists.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, you know, you mess it up and you put it back together again for your favorite character. Like pretty cool.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. This is like $12.99. Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
great.
all of these, right, are.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, there actually we did I did another interview with someone where we talked about like kids that have different needs when it comes to figures. Like some of them love the action stuff, but some of them
Mhm.
are more intuitive when it comes to like puzzles,
Right.
problem solving, things like that. So seeing something like that, that's actually pretty amazing.
Right. And so the person who's going to buy an action figure, right, to display, right, versus the kid who just wants to play with it, versus someone who just likes puzzles, who happens to like Dragon Ball, right? There's all these entry points to experience the brand, right? These are physical things to show that you're a fan, right?
Yeah.
And so that really, you know, these are all the different lines that we have, right? Like this one has a really cool feature where, like, you know, he has the Kamehameha and it goes, you know, I'm looking at the camera because it actually works a little bit backwards, right? So pull it back and then forward, right? So
That's awesome.
pretty cool looking stuff, right? And this
Yeah.
one's like $16.99. So for every price point, for every level, right, we provide something because someone could be watching Dragon Ball for the first time, or they could be watching it again for the first time, right? And I think one of the cool things about the Dragon Ball property is all these years later, it still holds up, right?
Yeah.
Like you can watch it again, and there are some cartoons, and I grew up with them, and I watch them again, and I'm like, wow, like I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, right? And it's like, oh my God, that was so corny. Or like, who uses one-liners like that, right? So, right? And we've all experienced those. But when you're watching Dragon Ball again, you see it, and of course, there's going to be those moments, right? And like realistically, like no one's going to call their shot when they make the shot, right? If I'm going to punch you, I'm not going to say, I'm going to give you this attack and telegraph it, right? No one does that. But that's part of the charm of the show. But when you watch it again as an adult or years later, you get to appreciate it on a different level. You're like, I know that this was a dramatic moment when I was a kid, but I didn't understand why, right? So it could be like, oh, that's when like Goku didn't do this so that his son could have it.
Yeah.
Right? Like how many heroes when our cartoon watching days become fathers, right? And all the stuff that goes along with it, right? And it changes the dynamic because all of a sudden Goku isn't it for himself anymore. He has to worry about his kid so that his kid can carry on the work that he knows he will never complete. Like that's pretty deep for a kid watching it for the first time, but it teaches these universal lessons of, you know, doing your best and, you know, fighting against own self-doubt and helping others be the best version of themselves and all these things and this moral quandary that this show does a fantastic job in narrating through. So you can enjoy it on all these different levels. Because if you just want to watch it without the sound and watch like the cool fights, like you can do that too. But if you sit down and really focus on it and really go deep, like there's some pretty deep stuff that's there, right? Like you're not going to see that on Thundercats, right? So like that's kind of the stuff that I think really makes for all these different versions of just one character, right? And in the Dragon Ball line, for our 6.5-inch figure, we have 50 different character styles.
Wow.
56, yeah, and we're making more for these guys here. You know, the 12-inch ones, we have like 20 of them that aren't Goku, right? So it speaks to, obviously, you know, it's about Goku and why he's so endearing, right, and why he sort of ties the whole Dragon Ball universe together. But again, without the other characters and the villains that go against him, he would be a flat character, right? But you can't have two super deep characters fighting against each other, because then part of that story gets lost.
Yep.
Right?
That's true.
So when the writers of the show and doing all this stuff, they knew exactly what they were doing, right? And partly because it is so true to the actual manga itself, right? Like if you're a comic book fan and then you see the cartoon based off of the comic book, like they're going to take some liberties, right? They're going to be like, yeah, here's a story, but like all this stuff is missing, right? But if you look at the Dragon Ball manga versus Super or Dragon Ball Z, whatever it is, like, you know, oh, that's that part. And you recognize these things all the way, right? And it's not so far from the source material that you kind of have to wonder, like, what were they thinking? I mean, it's basically a storyboard, right?
Yeah.
And you just animate it. And I mean, that's oversimplistic, but the map has already been drawn, right? It's just, how can they make it work for a visual medium, right, that lends itself to sound effects and dialogue and speed and timing and all the stuff that you can't get from, you know, just the written page.
Wow. Yeah, no, you're right. It's just something about Dragon Ball. It's first of all, it's international. It does well in Japan, does well here, which is, and it's just in the fans are fanatic about it. Like every fan will know, like, character arcs, all these things. You can't really say that for the other not that this Voltron. Voltron's great, but when we ask, like, Voltron, they'll talk about like the Five Lions, but then you say, oh, what about the one that does cars and planes? What about the other one that's like three robots in one? You know, then it gets a little hazy. But Dragon Ball, the fandom is very excited about it. Yeah, you're right. It's almost like the best of the Superman mythos with the, like, made for kids. And it's, yeah, even if you don't care about the deep philosophies and stuff going on in Dragon Ball, just the action scenes are just I don't want to sound cliche, but out of this world. You know,
They are.
It's yeah.
Yeah, and they're action scenes that, you know, like I said before, like no one had ever seen before, right? Like he got cut in half, like his arm got torn off. Like you don't see that, right? When you see something like that, it's almost like the creators, when they were writing this stuff, they're like, how would a kid imagine it? You know, if you have your action figures and the two are fighting, and you're gonna, you know, cut someone literally in half, and then you show it on screen, you're going to be like, that's what I thought it was going to look like, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very validating when you watch these things, because it really does take your imagination and really meets it halfway, right? You can look at kids playing with their toys and doing all these things, and like the color of their imagination is like this deep purple with like little yellow spots, if I imagine what it would look like, right? But they do that very same thing in every episode. Right? Like with the sound effects, and then kind of over the top, and then the stare down, and then the close up on the face to really see the emotion. That's what we're all kids at heart. And that's what we do when we play.
Yeah.
So to be able to amplify that on a screen, you're like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. That's how I would have done it. That's the test of a great story. That when you see it, you'll be like, yeah, like I should have directed this episode, because it would look just like that. Right. So which is pretty cool.
Okay. So getting back to the toys a bit, is this all available now?
Yes, like all this stuff, and there's stuff in the works, and there's new characters that we'll be announcing in the future. But like all this stuff here is available, right? Whether it's Amazon or Best Buy or Target or Walmart or Hobby Lobby, like all this stuff is already out there, right? Which proves that, like, you know, Dragon Ball is anime, of course, just the overall style, but it's bigger than anime, right? Like to say it's mainstream is an understatement, right? Like if your grandmother at least knows who Goku is, whether she's watched anything or not, like that shows the test of time. It's professional athletes who wear their t-shirts. You see it like decals on the back of trucks. Like I see it on the street at least once or twice a week. Now, granted, I work with all this stuff, so I'm more attuned to seeing it, but I see it enough, and random places that I know it isn't just people who are only watching the show and nothing else. Right? We did this fantastic research study on Dragon Ball fans and what they do and how they live. And for example, for like these guys in the 6.5-inch figures for like $20, the fans who buy these, they don't buy one. Like literally, they never buy one. They buy in multiples, right? They buy 2, 3, 4, and I think like the median was like they buy like an average of like 6 to 7, right? Which means that it's not just about the character, right? It's about what the characters, how they interact with each other, right? And so as a marketer, when I look at this stuff, I'm thinking to myself, there's something there, right? For a storyline that's been going back for like 20 some odd years, right? That people can watch over and over again and enjoy on different levels, right? And that sort of manifests itself in a physical thing, whether it's a $10 figure or a $14 figure or something for like $25, right? So it's for every need. And then this is just like the toys that Bandai America does, right? Like we have a sister company and they do like the higher end collectibles. And you'll have like your figures that are like $40, $50. And they have like 25 points of articulation and like super razor sharp detail, like where even like the torn clothing, you can kind of see how torn it is, like fantastic stuff, right? But what we do here at Bandai America is we want to be able to provide an entry point that anybody can embrace, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing that if you're not a fan, you'd be like, this thing's like $60. Like, well, I don't know. But like $10, like that's like coffee and a scone, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to last you a lot longer. And so I think when a lot of people see these, they're sort of like, I remember Dragon Ball. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And they see in the store easily and accessible. And then for some people who might not be familiar with Dragon Ball, and they pick up one of these figures for their kid or they remember it, and they'll be like, let me go on YouTube because I think I remember that scene. And then they see the scene and they'll be like, oh my gosh, you know, like I remember that. And then it's only a matter of time before they're going to go on another streaming platform and they're going to watch the first couple episodes. And they're like, oh my gosh, I remember this. And then off they go on their journey, right? And they introduce them to other people. Like, have you seen this? Like, yeah, no, you got to see it again because it's really good, right? We're seeing that more people are subscribing to anime over-the-top streaming platforms than ever before, right? Like, the wave has already happened, right?
Yeah.
It's just getting bigger and bigger, and more people are hearing about it, and we're seeing levels of exponential growth, not just in, like, people who subscribe to, like, Crunchyroll or Funimation or, like, Anime Kids. Like, all those things are rising at the same time, right? Which means that people have been exposed to it long enough that new people are getting on board, right? It's not like kids is going to, and we've already know that kids are a huge component of the growth of anime, right? Like once a kid is on their parents' Netflix account and they see there's an anime section, right? Like they know how to get on now and they're just going to explore. That's a new one. I had no idea, right? Or they go to this one saying like, my friends are talking about it. I want to see what it's all about, right? And part of what Bandai does, besides just the Dragon Ball stuff, is, you know, we provide that expertise in anime that is such a big thing right now that, again, like the Dragon Ball collection, people love anime because it's deep, engaging storylines that you can enjoy on lots of different levels. And to be able to create a physical thing that represents the show that you love, like that's what we do. And this is just a small, you know, appetizer for a small corner of the room that we already occupy.
Yeah, and plus it's Dragon Ball has been around for so long now that parents are introducing it to their kids.
Yeah.
They see how well the toys are well crafted and put together, and they're joining in and playing with their kids.
Yeah.
It's definitely a great time to be a kid now. I wish I had all these.
It's an excuse now. Like, you're a grown man. What are you doing? Like, no, I'm bonding with my kid. Right?
Although nothing wrong with adults collecting figures. I know many do. And
well, some people collect statues, some people collect thimbles, right? This is no different, right? Like really. And the fact that like if some people are collecting collectibles or whatever they might be, like these ones you can move. You can change them. You can display them any way that you want, right? You can't do that with a whole lot of things like if you're collecting spoons, right?
Yeah.
Or cards or mugs from other countries. Like there are people who collect Dragon Ball figures from other countries as well, because some countries they have, here's this version, with a slightly different costume or slightly different hair, right, than what's available here. So like this is just the tip of the iceberg of stuff that just exists out there in the world. We just happen to have this stuff available in the US.
Oh, wow. Well, keeping with the theme of Goku, is there anything in the works concerning Goku coming up? Whether it be video games, puzzles, or toy related in some way?
Yes. Well, over the summer, just a few weeks ago, Toy Animation, right, and associated with Shuei, right? There's going to be a new Dragon Ball movie, right? That's going to be coming out 2023-ish, depending on movies take a long time to make, right? But we know the title. It's going to be Dragon Ball Superhero, right?
Ooh, okay.
And, pretty cool. And when they announced it, the internet went crazy, like, oh my gosh, there's going to be a new Dragon Ball movie. And then all the questions started, right? And they're like, who's it going to be about? And the creators of the film, they put out like a little teaser animation, right? And they show Goku, right? And they show him on the top of the Dragon Ball Super logo and does this cool little move. And you can tell by looking at it, like the animation is like super smooth, right? And really detailed. And so obviously, he's going to be part of it, right? And they want to continue to surprise the fans. So like there's stuff in the works in terms of like who's going to be the main villain and who are going to be the other characters there. And they released some artist concepts of like Krillin's going to be a little bit different, right? And they have like Piccolo and he's going to have a slightly different costume and all this stuff we already know, right? So it's just whetting everyone's appetite that something new is going to be coming, and it's by the creators, right? And so they really put their heart and soul into it, and they want to make sure that it's faithful and rewarding all the fans who've stuck with us for the last 20 some odd years.
All right. I have one more question for you. I'm going to put you in a hot seat.
Uh-oh.
All right. Who is stronger, Goku or Superman?
It would depend. I know there's this debate out there, right? And in a former life, I worked at DC Comics, so I have my foot in both rings. So I have a little bit of expertise in both. I would say, if you take the component of time out of the equation, then I would have to say that Superman would be technically stronger, right? But if you put the element of time into the equation and all the different going from this planet to the next and the Dragon Balls and going back in time and like destroying planets, like it's so over the top that Goku is stronger, right? Just because in the storylines, the closest we've ever seen of Superman, right, doing anything on a planetary scale is him like in the movie, like spinning the world backwards and then like time went backwards. Well, first of all, like, no. Like that would have destroyed the planet if he actually stopped the rotation, right? So that's the worst he would have done, as opposed to Goku, who screams so loud the weather changes, right? Like just that instance alone would say, as far as like pure strength and all the stuff that he can do and all the forms, like he would be stronger. Now, who would win in a fight? They both are good, so they probably wouldn't even fight each other, right? It's one of those things. So it's good to know that they're both in their own separate universes and they're both powers of good and they believe in the best and others and that kind of stuff. But yeah, secretly Goku.
Excellent. I do not disagree. All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. This is fantastic. I'm just adding more stuff to my my son's Christmas list. So thank you for this.
No, you're very welcome. Good to talk to you.
Well, viewers, do you agree? Do you disagree with us? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And thank you to our viewers for watching. And stay tuned for more news. Have a good day, everyone.